Good afternoon, Council. I agree. I second what the previous gentleman talked about in terms of definitions. But rather than equity, what I would like to see is justice. Justice needs to happen in this situation. We can't debate about this anymore. This book I study every single day. I'm in The Devil in Silicon Valley by Stephen Peaty. And we haven't even scratched the surface of what justice looks like. This city allowed for pesticides to be sprayed on my ancestors. My grandmother, my father, my mother, and 7 tias were relegated, marginalized, discriminated against, and relegated to the east side of San Jose and Sal Si Puedes. Well, you know what? That means get out if you can. Well, guess what? They did get out. And that's why I'm here redeeming what it is that they could not for themselves. So before we get into what equity means and using these very euphemistic terms that don't have any real actual root in what happened, I would suggest everybody on this council first look at the documentary entitled Dolores. It's on PBS and it's very simple. You just go on PBS and watch it. And then within that context, using that as a framework to guide your decisions in terms of how you define what that means, use that as a guide. We haven't talked about the racist policies of the redlining that happened, that concentrated wealth in Willow, Glen. We haven't even talked about that. That needs to be put on the table, because what happened as a result of that is that the average age of the homeless person on the streets now is 50. So that means that that person normally would have inherited wealth from their parents had they had the opportunity to accumulate it. But because of these racist whiteification, not gentrification, it was whiteification of Willow, Glen, and Rose Garden, that it deprived Mexicans of the ability to generate that ancestral wealth that they could have possibly passed down to the next generation. So, like I said, as a citizen of this city that has suffered under those policies, I'm looking for justice, not equity.
Thank you. Mr. Soto, don't go anywhere. We're going to call you up in just a moment. Just on item 2.1, is there a motion? Okay, let's vote on item 2.1. Then item 2.9, you also wanted to speak on this item.
Yes. It's about me. I'm not sure if I really understand it correctly, but it's somehow another stated that it was a renaming initiative. I'm not sure if I'm quite sure on that, but my mother taught at Gardner. She taught at Gardner, she taught at Washington, and she taught at Grant Elementary. And so, that is the horseshoe. It has been commonly acknowledged as the horseshoe. And like I said, we haven't even come to a point as a collective, as a city, to come to terms with the injustices that that particular neighborhood has experienced. And I'll give you an example. The homes on the south side of the tracks have been given historical landmark status, which means they are going to be protected from the light rail, from the high-speed rail coming through. The homes on the south side of the tracks, which is all the horseshoe area, those are going to be demolished. And this council is lying. They are flat out lying to the people. Okay, because the horseshoe and all of those streets that are alongside of that, it's going to be gone, because you're going to have 4 tracks that are going to have to go through there. Okay, and nobody's being honest about that. Nobody's putting that on the table. And so we want to get into these issues where we're going to rename that area, and this city as a whole has not even come to terms with the racist policies that created that area in the first place. And so, just until we get to a point to where we can talk about race, we can talk about the historical injustices that Mexicans have experienced ever since Manifest Destiny. Ever since Manifest Destiny happened we just barely grappled with Peter Burnett being changed. Peter Burnett was the most racist governor that this state has ever had. He was, so was Stanford. Leland Stanford was part of the Chinese Exclusionary Act.
Thank you, Mr. Soto. I believe Councilmember Davis, you indicated you need to recuse yourself.
Yes,
okay.
I live in this neighborhood, and so I know this is the first of a couple of votes that we'll be taking on this item. And even though I do not live in a contributing structure in this neighborhood, I do need to recuse myself from all of the votes.
Right.
Is
okay.
what our city attorney has told me.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Esparza?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I had wanted to pull this item because I wanted to take the opportunity to highlight the fact that nearly all of our historic districts and conservation areas are in District 3 and District 6. They are Guadalupe, Washington, Hanchett, Hester Park, Market Almaden, Martha Gardens, Nagley Park, and Palm Haven. And while I support the North Willow Glen conservation area, I just want to be clear about that. I wanted to stop and think about what that means, what a conservation area means in the context of the conversations that we've had here about equity and about the displacement and development taking place in our city today. So because of historic redlining and the intentional lack of investment in certain communities, not all of our communities in San Jose, as you know, were created equal. And now we're affording an extra layer of protection and disincentivizing development in areas of the city that have historically been the wealthier and whiter areas. And I think it's important to recognize this and to take that context into consideration as we make decisions about historic conservation. And on the east side, we have a few individual sites like McDonald Hall, which is a national and a county historic landmark, and the Cesar Chavez home that the city of San Jose has designated as historic. And what does it say about whose history we're preserving when we only have a couple of sites preserved in a community that was instrumental in the civil rights history of this country, while we set aside whole neighborhoods and other parts of the city for historic preservation? And I think that's a question we need to ask ourselves as we consider what is deemed historic. And I don't know if Rosalind is